and welcome to Touchstone Music. I'm currently doing a series on music and albums from the 1960s. These are albums I purchased when they were first released in the 1960s and which have been musical touchstones for me ever since. My goal is to introduce these wonderful albums to people who haven't heard them before and to reintroduce them to people who have, but perhaps haven't listened to them for a while. Fair disclosure, this video contains no music clips, only my commentary. Today, we feature the debut album of a groundbreaking artist. We have a real treat today. The artist is Jimi Hendrix with the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and the album is Are You Experienced? Well, are we? Let's find out. While the Jimi Hendrix Experience was actually composed of three musicians, Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding, and Mitch Mitchell, Hendrix's management reportedly intended to feature Hendrix's music exclusively. For management, the other two members were only there to support Hendrix, not to express their own musical ideas. At 23, Hendrix was already a veteran of the American R&B scene as a backing musician in various bands. Meanwhile, in Britain, Chas Chandler, ex-bassist for The Animals, wanted to start a new career managing and producing musical acts. Chandler saw Hendrix playing in New York in 1966 and was so impressed that he brought him back to England. Chandler and ex-Animals manager, Michael Jeffrey, signed Hendrix to a management and production contract in September 1966 in Britain. They recruited guitarist Noel Redding to play electric bass, and drummer Mitch Mitchell as Hendrix's backup band. Newly formed Track Records signed the Experience to a recording contract that October, and they recorded their first song, a single, Hey Joe, on 23 October 1966. Released in December 66, backed on the flip side by Stone Free, the Hendrix composition, it peaked at number 6 on the British charts. Further single hits followed in March of 67 with Purple Haze, peaking at number 3, and in May of 67 with The Wind Cries Mary, a ballad, which peaked at number 6. Meanwhile, the Experience were tearing up live stages in Britain and Europe, earning plaudits from critics and fellow musicians alike, including such guitar luminaries as Eric Clapton. The stage was therefore set for them to record their first album. So unlike other albums I presented so far, which were recorded in a matter of days or weeks, Are You Experienced was reportedly recorded in 16 sessions over a much longer period of time, 5 months as a matter of fact, from 23 October 66 to 4th of April 67. I suspect this was partly due to the management's determination to present his music as fully as possible, to their credit, I might add, partly due to recording limitations of the British studios at the time, and more on this in a moment, and partly due to financial restraints. Chandler's management company was in its infancy, and money was tight. Chandler and Hendrix completed much of the pre-production work away from the studios to save costs. Hendrix worked out most of the chord changes and song tempos. Chandler, very much hands-on in the studio, by the way, would instruct Noel Redding on what bass parts to play. 3 London studios were utilized: Delane Lee, Olympic, and CBS. Now, of the 3, they seem to prefer Olympic the most. They seem to feel it had the best facilities for their purposes. One drawback of British studios at the time, as I mentioned before, was being limited to 4 tracks, in contrast to some American studios, which now boasted 8-track capabilities. So the recording engineers had to use innovative ways to crowd more tracks into the songs, like recording the bass and the drum separately and then mixing them down into one track so there was more room for overdubs. One cost saving was the speed with which the band could learn new songs in the studio. These were ace musicians. Despite tight money, Chandler allowed them to record multiple takes of songs so they could pick the best one. This gave them the luxury of having one live band track as the basis of each recording, rather than trying to attack it together from several different parts to make one whole. The hit singles, by the way, were released during this period that the album was being recorded, thus whetting the public's appetite for the debut album. The 3 British chart singles were omitted from the UK release of the album, which was a common practice at the time, by the way, but were included on the US release. The album was released in the UK by Track Records on 12th of May 1967. After Hendrix's successful live performance at the Monterey Pop Festival in California in June, the album was released in the US by Reprise Records on 23rd of August 67. The album spent 37 weeks on the UK charts, peaking at number 2. It reached a number 5 on the Billboard Top LPs chart, where it remained for 106 weeks. Are You Experience turned out to be a commercial success. It sold 1 million copies within 7 months of its release. So, Are You Experience is the name of one of the tracks on the album, the final track as a matter of fact. It also alludes to the bombshell music the Experience were performing live, a mixture of blues, R&B, psychedelic, acid rock, as well as an increasingly outrageous and flamboyant stage show, including setting fire to Hendrix's guitar at the end of a performance. You think your experience, the title seems to ask. Wait till you hear this. The cover of the UK release was designed by Chris Stamp. He was co-founder of Track Records, as a matter of fact, using band photos by photographer Bruce Fleming. Fleming had done previous work for such groups as the Hollies, the Dave Clark Five, the Animals. But Hendrix disliked the UK cover, so graphic designer Carl Ferris was engaged to shoot a new cover for the US release. Hendrix liked Ferris's work on the album Evolution by the Hollies, released in June of 67. Ferris had a background as a fashion photographer, and he made detailed suggestions for the group's hairstyling and clothes. Now, Hendrix's girlfriend trimmed his hair, forming the signature Hendrix afro that the other two band members liked and copied. Eric Clapton of the band Cream also copied Hendrix's new hairdo, and you can see the result of that on the back cover photos of Cream's second album release, Disraeli Gears, which we've covered in an earlier video, as a matter of fact. Ferris used a fisheye lens shot from a low angle to emphasize Hendrix's hands. He used techniques to alter the colors of the photo also, which further enhanced their surreal aspect. And finally, he chose the yellow background and the liquid lettering to give the color the psychedelic look Hendrix desired. And Hendrix very much approved of the new cover. So, over the winter of 67-68, I saw a lot of local bands performing live. A number of the bands were playing underground music, and I began to hear covers of Jimi Hendrix's songs, and I got curious enough to ask the bands who the composer was so I could search out his album. By this time, I was used to exotic album covers, but nothing prepared me for this cover. There was a kind of static swagger to their pose on the U.S. release that just blew me away. The band looked so wild in the cover photo, I wasn't sure what to expect inside, but like everyone else, when I listened to it, I was blown away. The level of musicianship, the wide range of music on the album was awe-inspiring. In a time that saw a seemingly endless stream of innovative releases, the bar had been raised yet again, and one had to wonder where it would all end. The only caveat to that is there were so many releases at that time, so much good music coming out that, it could have easily been lost in the shuffle. And I think to a certain extent, it was only on retrospect that people looked at it again and said, wow, what a virtuoso debut album. On the other hand, it sold 1 million copies in 7 months, so it didn't do that badly either. We're going to talk about the music on side 1 and 2, and this is for the U.S. release, by the way. Just a couple of points. There's so much to unpack with their music, we won't spend a lot of time on it. Just to give you a couple of highlights, my suggestion is listen to it and enjoy it. First track is Purple Haze. This was their second hit single in Britain. To me, it's just a masterpiece of simplicity. The lyrics chronicle a dream Hendrix evidently had of walking under the sea, by the way. The song starts with a now signature Hendrix riff. Hendrix playing, especially on the guitar break, is surprisingly restrained, but there's lots of real good music on this. Manic Depression, the second song, there's real powerful drumming here by Mitch Mitchell and supports a real driving riff by Hendrix and Redding. One of my favorite songs in the album, basically a song about frustrated love. The boys really amp up the volume for song 2. Song 3 is not a Hendrix composition. It's a now classic version of a song by Billy Roberts called Hey Joe. This song has been covered by many artists, but Hendrix's version seems to have been the defining one. The Experience's first hit single in Britain, by the way. Song 4, Lover Confusion, heavy rock tune, some studio tricks enhancing the rhythm section. Song 5, May This Be Love. Now we have a simple, nicely arranged ballad. Presages later ballads by Hendrix, such as Little Wing on his second album, Axis Bold as Love. And here the trio again demonstrate that they are capable of tight, tastefully restrained playing when the song calls for it. The last song in side one is an up-tempo rocker called I Don't Live Today. During live performances, Hendrix often dedicated this song to American Indians and minorities. It's a song with a social message. He uses a manual wah effect rather than a wah-wah pedal, interestingly enough. Wah-wah pedals were just coming into vogue then. And there's lots of guitar feedback in the improv sections. A good way to end side one, very up-tempo song. I like it a lot. So in contrast to the fast-tempo ending of side one, side two starts with a ballad. The Wind Cries Mary, supposedly written by Hendrix after a fight with his girlfriend. Hendrix was a huge fan of Bob Dylan, and people compare these lyrics favorably to Dylan's writing, but Hendrix's arrangements were typically more sophisticated than Dylan's, however. The Experience's third hit single in Britain, I believe. The next song, Fire, speeds up the tempo. It's a pop tune showcasing the trio's ability to play fast and stay tight. Frenetic drumming by Mitchell. It's the fastest tune on the album. The next song, Third Stone from the Sun, is the longest cut on the original album. Now, Hendrix really lets his imagination go here. It's a multi-section song, spacey studio effects, spoken vocals, jazzy components. It really rewards multiple listenings. Very interesting song. The second from last song is Foxy Lady. This is a hard rock number and became one of Hendrix's most popular tunes, especially among other musicians, as a matter of fact. It was originally my favorite song on the album. I especially loved the Clapton-esque guitar break in the middle there. But the last song, Are You Experienced, is now my favorite song on the album. It's the most psychedelic song on the album, in my opinion, both melodically and lyrically. Lots of studio effects, backwards track guitars. It begins with scratchy and possibly backwards tracked string muting tones on an electric guitar, and predates actual hip-hop technique of scratching with a vinyl record on a turntable by years. In my opinion, this song makes a great conclusion to a great record. It sums up the album in a way that no other tune on the album could possibly have done. So normally this is the section where I sum up my thoughts about the album being featured. I've always viewed Hendrix as a very complex figure, both artistically and personally. I can't think of any words that would accurately encompass either the artist or his work, so instead I'll just offer a few final thoughts and observations. Most of us tend to compartmentalize music, I've noticed, into categories. I do it. Pop, rock, jazz, blues, country, R&B, folk, classical, soul, and so on. And we tend to separate them in our minds that way. Hendrix didn't seem to see any of those divisions, however. To me, it seemed like he only heard music, and maybe that's why his music is so difficult to categorize, because it flows so seamlessly from genre to genre within the context of any song. And this tendency would only increase on his subsequent releases, by the way. Jimi Hendrix would pass away at the age of 27, barely 3 years after the release of his debut album. The cause of death appeared to be related to an accidental overdose of prescription drugs, although the coroner declared the death as being an open verdict. With his death, Hendrix posthumously and unfortunately joined the infamous 27 Club, consisting of musicians who died at 27 years of age. Other members included Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones, Jim Morrison of the Doors, singer Janis Joplin, and others since then, unfortunately. His death deprived us of his musical genius, and we will always wonder what might have been had he survived. He was evidently beginning collaborations with other top musicians, such as American bluesman Stephen Stills of Crosby, Stills, and Nash, as well as jazz giant Miles Davis. Can you imagine the two of them, the music they might have made together? I wonder what other musical collaborations we might have witnessed. Carlos Santana, who was just starting to hit his stride around this time. Eric Clapton, who was a huge fan of his and a good friend, as I understand. Jeff Beck, to name just a few possibilities. Still, we are left with a large library of his work, both finished pieces and works in progress, to enjoy and take inspiration from. Well, I spoke earlier about the difficulty in categorizing Hendrix's music. At its heart, I think I hear a Texas blues man. in the lineage of older artists such as Freddie King, Hendrix contemporaries such as Johnny Winter, and future ones such as Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Lyrically, his interest in science fiction and mythology made the psychedelic era the perfect springboard for his budding songwriting. However, he would not be bound by this. Before his passing, his writing was already moving past psychedelia into soul, R&B, jazz, and beyond. I see Are You Experienced as the prototype album for his future work, and it's been another touchstone record for me since I purchased it in the 1960s. I hope it will also be one of yours. And that's all for this edition. As always, until next time, be well, and thanks for joining me.